She stood alone at the edge of the dock for 23 days. No uniform, no rank. Base personnel whispered she was lost or insane. Some mocked her, others left coffee she never touched, but she just kept watching the sea with those haunted eyes. Then the alarms sounded, an unidentified nuclear submarine approaching at attack speed. As weapons locked and officers scrambled, every system suddenly went dark. And in the silence that followed came a sound no one expected. Her call sign echoing back from the deep. The submarine surfaced for her alone. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to hear more untold tales of those who serve in silence. The morning fog clung to Naval Station Evergreen like a shroud, obscuring the boundaries between water and sky. Through this gauzy curtain, the silhouette of Maricel Arnaud stood motionless at the edge of Observation Dock C, as she had every day for the past 3 weeks. At 45, Marcel wasn't old, but something in her eyes suggested she'd witnessed more than most. She wore practical civilian clothes, faded jeans, a navy peacoat that had seen better days, and sturdy boots. Her only identification, a visitor's badge with minimal information clipped to her lapel. "There she is again," muttered Petty Officer Daniel to his colleague as they passed. "Doc, lady's back." His companion shrugged. "Admiral's office says she has clearance, not our problem." Mariel heard them. She heard everything, but her gaze remained fixed on the distant horizon where the steel-gray water met the equally colorless sky. Lieutenant Commander Thaddeus Wakefield approached her with measured steps, irritation evident in his squared shoulders. He was a man who valued order and protocol. This woman represented neither. "Ma'am," he began, the formality forced. "I've allowed this, whatever it is, because your credentials checked out barely." He studied her weathered face. "But my sailors are starting to talk. Some think you're a ghost." Mariel finally turned to him, her eyes reflecting something distant and unknowable. "The sea takes its time, Commander." "So must I." Wakefield's jaw tightened. "I've checked every database. Your civilian contractor tag doesn't link to any active project. Whatever game headquarters is playing. I'm not playing games, Commander." "Then what exactly are you doing on my dock every day?" She turned back toward the water waiting. Wakefield walked away muttering about headquarters nonsense and security theater, leaving Maricel alone once more. Throughout the day, base personnel passed by, some mockingly saluted, others whispered theories. A young Enon named Finola Bryn silently left a coffee cup beside her before hurrying away. Mariel didn't touch it. As the sun finally broke through the clouds and began its descent, casting long golden fingers across the water, Marcel moved for the first time in hours. She sat on a nearby bench, withdrew a small leather-bound notebook from her pocket, and made a single mark with a pencil before returning both to her pocket. Day 23, still waiting. The next morning brought a light rain, but Marcel's routine remained unchanged. She arrived at 0600 hours precisely, took her position at the edge of the dock, and kept her vigil. The sea was choppier today, white caps visible farther out in the strait. 2 petty officers huddled under the overhang of a nearby maintenance shed, watching her through the drizzle. "You know what I heard?" the first one said, not bothering to lower his voice. "Lieutenant Prescott thinks she's the widow of some officer who went down at sea. Comes here thinking her husband's going to sail home someday." "Nah," replied the second. "If she were family, she'd have different credentials. My money's on her being some contractor who got her project kinlet, but nobody bothered to revoke her base access. Or maybe she's just crazy. Got fixated on the water." They laughed, their voices carrying easily across the empty dock. Maritixel didn't react. The rain intensified, soaking through her peacoat, but she remained still, her eyes scanning the horizon methodically, as if following a predetermined pattern. By midday, the rain had stopped, but thick clouds remained, turning the world gray and indistinct. Commander Wakefield walked the perimeter of the base with the head of security, Lieutenant Rousseau. "I want to know more about our dock visitor," Wakefield said as they approached the waterfront. Her credentials were approved by Admiral Holt's office directly, but when I called to verify, they gave me the runaround. "You think she's some kind of security risk?" Rousseau asked, glancing toward the solitary figure at the dock's edge. "I think anyone who stands in one spot for over 3 weeks straight is either planning something or knows something. Either way, I want answers." They changed course, heading directly toward Merit Excel. As they approached, Rousseau noticed something that Wakefield had missed in his previous encounters. A slight bulge at her ankle, visible only when the wind pressed her pant leg against her skin. "Commander," he said quietly, "she's carrying ankle holster, left leg." Wakefield's expression hardened. "Armed on my base without disclosure, that ends now." Before they could reach her, a group of sailors emerged from the mess hall, heading toward their afternoon duties. One of them, a stocky chief petty officer named Aldrich, veered off from the group, heading directly toward Merit Excel. "Hey lady," he called out, his voice carrying a slight slur, suggesting he'd had more than coffee at lunch. "You planning on standing there forever? What are you even looking at?" Marksell didn't respond. "I'm talking to you," Aldrich pressed, moving closer, entering her personal space. "You deaf or just rude?" Wakefield and Rousseau quickened their pace. But before they could intervene, Aldrich reached out and grabbed Marksell's shoulder, spinning her to face him. What happened next occurred so quickly that later, neither Wakefield nor Rousseau could agree on the exact sequence of movements. Merit Excel's hand moved in a blur, catching Aldrich's wrist and redirecting his momentum. There was a subtle shift in her stance, and suddenly Aldrich was on his knees, his arm bent behind him at an angle that made him gasp. Meritxell leaned down, whispered something in his ear that made all color drain from his face, then released him just as Wakefield and Rousseau arrived. "What the hell is going on here?" Wakefield demanded. Aldrich scrambled to his feet, straightening his uniform. "Nothing, sir. Just lost my footing on the wet dock." "That's not what I saw." "All due respect, Commander," I stumbled. "The lady here helped me regain my balance." Wakefield looked to Marksell, who had already returned to her original position, eyes back on the horizon as if nothing had happened. "Chief Petty Officer Aldrich, report to my office at 1400 hours, Wakefield ordered. "Yes, sir." As Aldrich departed, Wakefield turned to Meritxell. "You're carrying a concealed weapon on my base." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "I have authorization. Let me see it." Without taking her eyes from the water, she reached into her coat pocket and produced a folded document. Wakefield opened it and found himself looking at a security clearance signature he recognized immediately. Admiral Lysander Holt, Commander of Pacific Fleet Operations. "This doesn't explain who you are or what you're doing here," Wakefield said, handing the paper back. "No, it doesn't," she agreed. "But it confirms I have the right to be here." Wakefield studied her face, searching for any clue to her identity or purpose. "Whatever game you're playing, I'll figure it out eventually." "It's not a game, Commander," she said softly. "And when you do figure it out, you'll understand why I couldn't tell you." Later that afternoon in the base's operations center, Wakefield sat at his desk scrolling through personnel records. He'd been searching databases for hours looking for any mention of Merit Lau. Ensign Bryn knocked on his open door. "Sir, you asked to be notified about unusual communications. We just picked up increased chatter from Russian naval frequencies near the Bering Strait." Wakefield looked up. "Anything specific?" "Just movement patterns that don't match their usual patrol routes." "Could be nothing." Wakefield nodded. "Keep monitoring," and Bryn. "Sir, that woman on the dock. What do you make of her?" Bryn hesitated. "Permission to speak freely." "Granted. She reminds me of my grandfather. He was force recon in Vietnam. Had the same thousandy stare. Always scanning, always alert, even decades after coming home." "You think she's military?" "Was military, sir. Something in how she stands, how she observes. She's trained, but trying not to look it." Wakefield considered this. "Thank you, Ensign. That's all." After Bryn left, Wakefield turned to his computer and typed in a new search parameter. "Decommission. Project's Admiral Holt Special Clearance." The results came back heavily redacted, but one name caught his attention. Project Lazarus. 3 days later, the Operations Center of Naval Station Evergreen hummed with quiet efficiency. Commander Wakefield reviewed the morning reports when the double doors burst open. Ensign Bryn rushed in, her normally composed demeanor shattered. "Sir, satellite intel just detected unusual movement in the Bering Strait. Something large moving fast." The room transformed instantly from routine to readiness. Officers crowded around monitoring stations as analysts called out updates. Depth and signature readings match a severed Vince-class submarine. Lieutenant Oasanjo reported no scheduled Allied movements in that sector. Notify Strackham and patch me through to Pacific Fleet. Wakefield ordered, his voice steady despite the adrenaline surge. Full alert status. As alarms began to sound across the base, Wakefield's gaze drifted to the window overlooking the harbor. There, in her usual spot, stood Maritel Arnault, unmoved by the chaos erupting around her. "Sir," Annenbrand said, following his gaze. "Should someone remove the civilian?" Wakefield narrowed his eyes. "Send security. I want her in a shelter or off my base." Outside, a young lieutenant approached Maritel, breathless from running. "Ma'am, we're under security protocol. You need to move to a shelter immediately." Marxell turned to him with a serene smile. "It's finally time. Thank you, but I'll stay. This isn't a drill. There's an unidentified submarine approaching at attack speed." "I know," she said simply. Back in operations, tension climbed as the submarine drew closer. "Target is 18 m out and closing," Brin reported. "No response to communication attempts. Weapon systems online." Lieutenant Obasanjo confirmed. Commander Wakefield's expression hardened. "Lock target solutions." Suddenly, every screen in the operations center flickered and went dark. The room fell into silence, broken only by confused murmurs and the sound of switches being frantically flipped. "What just happened?" Wakefield demanded. "Everything's down, sir," Brin responded, her fingers flying over her keyboard. "Sonar, radar, communications, complete system failure." In the silence that followed, a single sound emerged through the speakers, a series of clicks and tones in a pattern that made no sense to anyone in the room. Except Enan Brin, whose eyes widened. "Sir, that's not random noise. That's an old NATO submarine recognition code. But modified." "Modified how?" Wakefield demanded. "It's a call sign," she whispered. "Recognition dawning. Someone's broadcasting a personal call sign. Shadow Finn." Commander Wakefield stood frozen, recognition flickering in his eyes. "Shadow Finn. That's impossible." "You recognize it, sir?" Brin asked. It was classified decades ago, part of a program that his voice trailed off as he looked again toward the dock where Meredith stood. "Everyone with me now." Moments later, Wakefield and a team of armed Marines raced toward the waterfront. The fog had lifted completely, revealing Meredith Excel still at her post, watching the water with newfound intensity. "Who the hell are you?" Wakefield demanded, gripping her arm. "That submarine is broadcasting a classified recognition signal that hasn't been used in 20 years. 32 years, actually," she corrected him calmly. "August 19th, 1993. The last time it was used was on the USS Barracuda's final mission." Wakefield's face drained of color. "The Barracuda was lost with all hands in the Arctic. How could you possibly?" His words were cut short as the water before them broke. Slowly, the massive black hole of a submarine surfaced, sleek, silent, and bearing no national markings or identification. "That's impossible," Wakefield whispered. "That's a Seawolf class. We decommissioned the last one a decade ago." The submarine's hatch opened. A figure emerged. An older man in an unmarked uniform. His weathered face scanning the dock until his eyes found Merit Excel. From the sub's external speakers came a voice. "Wildcat Actual to Shadow Finn Authentication Code. Sierra Echo Alpha November. Come home, Shadow." Marxell's eyes filled with tears as she stepped forward, pulling something from around her neck, a small metal object catching the sunlight. "That's an officer's command key," Brin whispered, recognition dawning. Marxell spoke into a small device hidden in her palm. "Shadowfin authenticated. Mission complete." The man on the submarine snapped to attention and saluted her formally. Behind them, a car pulled up to the dock. A naval officer stepped out. Not just any officer, but Admiral Lysander Hull, commander of Pacific Fleet Operations. "Stand down," he ordered Wakefield's security team, who looked to their commander in confusion. Wakefield stared at the woman he'd dismissed for weeks. "You're the XO of the Barracuda, listed as lost at sea 30 years ago." "Sometimes," Meritzel said quietly, "the best place to hide America's secrets is in plain sight, Commander." The submarine commander called down. "Ghost Fleet returning to operational status. Captain Project Lazarus awaits your command." Admiral Holt stepped forward. "Captain Meritzel Arnault, welcome back to American waters. The waiting is over." A wave of murmurs spread through the assembled naval personnel as realization dawned. The woman they had mocked, ignored, and dismissed was one of their own, and apparently someone of extraordinary importance. "Sir," Wakefield addressed the admiral, struggling to maintain his composure. "What exactly is happening here?" Admiral Holt's eyes never left the submarine. "History, Commander. 30 years of hidden history resurfacing exactly when we need it most." The admiral turned to the gathering crowd of confused personnel. "Secure the perimeter. No communications, in or out. This is now a compartmentalized operation." He glanced at Meritxell. "Captain, I believe you and I have much to discuss." Meritxell nodded, her posture now transformed. The slouched civilian was gone, replaced by a naval officer whose bearing spoke of decades of command experience. "Commander Wakefield," Admiral Holt continued, "you and your senior staff will join us. The rest of you maintain security protocols and await further instructions." 20 minutes later, in the base's secure conference room, Admiral Holt stood before a small group of officers. The blinds were drawn and electronic countermeasures hummed softly in the background, preventing any surveillance. "What I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels," Hull began. "Until today, fewer than 12 people in our government knew this program still existed." He nodded to Meritxell, who had changed into a naval uniform that someone had quickly procured for her. The captain's insignia gleamed on her collar. In 1993, as the Cold War was winding down, a decision was made by Naval High Command, Meritxell explained, her voice stronger and more authoritative than they had ever heard it. "While Russia was in disarray, we had a unique opportunity to create a contingency that even our closest allies wouldn't know about." She moved to a digital display and entered a series of codes. Schematics appeared on the screen. A modified Seawolf-class submarine with technological adaptations that made Wakefield's eyes widen. The USS Barracuda was officially declared lost during a training exercise near the Arctic Circle. In reality, it went deep, deeper than any submarine had gone before. And then it disappeared. "Disappeared where?" Lieutenant Obasanjo asked. "Everywhere and nowhere," Marxell replied. "For 32 years, the Barracuda has been operating on a protocol called Ghost Duty. Never surfacing, never communicating except through dead drops and prearranged signals, developing and testing technologies that our adversaries couldn't imagine." Admiral Holt took over. "The submarine you just saw is not the Barracuda. That's the USS Phantom, the second vessel in what we called the Ghost Fleet. 3 submarines, each with specialized capabilities, each believed lost or decommissioned." "How is that even possible?" Wakefield asked. "The logistics alone would be impossible. Supplies, maintenance. That's where Project Lazarus came in," Marxell explained. "Deep-sea supply caches, automated maintenance drones, and periodic rendezvous with unmarked research vessels in international waters. Every system redundant, every protocol designed to ensure these vessels could operate indefinitely if needed." "And the crew?" and Bryn asked quietly. "They've been underwater for 30 years. A shadow crossed Meritxell's face. "Not the same crew. The original volunteers served 10-year rotations. When their time was up, carefully orchestrated accidents would claim their lives officially while they were secretly reintegrated into society with new identities. Some chose to remain," Admiral Hull added. "Some have been down there since the beginning." "And your role, Captain?" Wakefield asked, studying Meritxell with new eyes. "I was the handler," she answered. "The surface contact. I would appear at designated locations at specific times, confirming that the chain of command remained intact and that it was safe for them to proceed with their mission." "Which was what exactly?" Admiral Hull and Meritxell exchanged glances. "Insurance," the Admiral said finally. "A capability so advanced, so unexpected that if all else failed, America would still have an ace in the hole." Wakefield leaned forward. "With respect, sir, what's changed? Why surface now?" "Because they detected something we didn't," Marxell said, her expression grave. "Something our conventional systems missed entirely." She typed another code into the terminal. A sonar reading appeared unlike anything the officers had seen before. 3 weeks ago, the Phantom detected unusual acoustic signatures near our western seaboard, patterns that match theoretical propulsion systems the Chinese have been developing. Except these weren't Chinese. "Then whose were they?" Bryn asked. "That's the problem," Admiral Holt said quietly. "We don't know. The Ghost Fleet has been tracking vessels with technologies we can identify, using stealth systems beyond our current capabilities." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The Phantom surfaced because the situation has escalated beyond their protocols. Maritexel continued. They need direct orders, and they need to share what they've learned over the past 3 decades. Which is why you've been standing on that dock for 3 weeks, Wakefield realized. You were waiting for them to make contact. Maritzel nodded. The timing was approximate. They needed to be certain it was safe to surface. And the signal they broadcast, the one that crashed our systems, a technological demonstration, Admiral Hull explained, the Phantom carrier's electronic warfare capabilities decades ahead of anything in our active fleet. They needed to prove they could neutralize potential threats before revealing themselves. Lieutenant Rousseau spoke up for the first time. Sir, if I may ask, why wasn't Commander Wakefield briefed on this? If Captain Arnaud was going to be on his base for weeks? Because secrecy was paramount, Merit Excel answered before the Admiral could. Every person who knew about this program represented a potential security breach. Commander Wakefield's confusion and suspicion were genuine, which made my cover more convincing. Wakefield didn't look pleased by this explanation, but he nodded in understanding. What happens now? He asked. Admiral Holt straightened. Now we prepare. The Ghost Fleet is being reactivated and integrated with our current naval strategy. The technologies they've developed will be assessed, and where appropriate deployed to the rest of the fleet. And the unidentified vessels, Bryn asked. That's our top priority. Maritzel said. The Phantom will lead a task force to locate and identify these unknown contacts. I'll be rejoining the submarine as mission commander. The meeting continued for another hour as details were discussed and assignments distributed. When they finally emerged, the base had been locked down with additional security forces arriving by helicopter. Commander Wakefield walked with Maricel toward the dock where preparations were underway for the Phantom's formal reception. I owe you an apology, Captain, he said quietly. The way I treated you was exactly what I needed, she interrupted. Your suspicion, the base personnel's dismissal, it all served to make me invisible. That was the point. Still, what you've done, 30 years of service without recognition, is what I signed up for, she finished. Just like the crew of the Phantom, just like everyone involved in Project Lazarus, we understood the sacrifice. They reached the dock where Admiral Hull was speaking with Captain Thorne, the Phantom's commanding officer. The submarine gleamed in the afternoon light, its black hull absorbing the sun's rays. I have to ask, Wakefield said as they paused. That day, when Chief Aldrich confronted you, what did you say to him? For the first time, Marksel smiled, a genuine smile that transformed her face. I told him that if he ever touched me again, I'd make sure he spent the rest of his naval career cleaning latrines in Attic, Alaska. Wakefield couldn't help but laugh. Would you have, Commander? I may have been pretending to be a nobody, but I still had Admiral Holt's direct line. What do you think? Before he could respond, Innenbrun approached carrying a tablet. Captain R. Now, the Phantom's XO has transmitted the full technical specifications for their adaptive sonar array. It's unlike anything we've ever seen. Maritel took the tablet, scanning the information with practiced eyes. This is just the beginning, Enan. Wait until you see what else they've developed down there. As they talked, more naval personnel gathered around the submarine, some openly staring at the vessel that, according to official records, shouldn't exist. It must have been lonely, Bryn said suddenly. All those years carrying a secret like that. Meridic Cell's expression softened. It was, but knowing what was at stake made it bearable. She looked out at the Phantom, then back at the base, where she'd stood ignored for weeks. Sometimes the most important service is the kind no one ever knows about. Admiral Holt's office had been transformed into a secure briefing room. Maps and classified documents covered the walls and senior officers sat in stunned silence as they processed what they were hearing. Captain Arnaud and the USS Barracuda were part of an ultra-classified program, a ghost fleet that officially never existed. Admiral Hull explained, when tensions with Russia eased in the 90s, instead of decommissioning these advanced vessels, we sent them deep. Their mission to remain hidden, developing technologies and intelligence-gathering methods no adversary would suspect. Maritixel sat quietly in her newly issued uniform, captain's insignia gleaming on her collar. She looked both strange and right in it, as though returning to her true self after a long disguise. The Barracuda's communication systems were designed to remain dormant for decades. The Admiral continued, waiting for the right geopolitical conditions to resurface. Captain Arnaud was their liaison, the only crew member who returned to shore. Her mission was to wait at designated points until the submarine returned. But why stand on the dock for weeks? Wakefield asked, still processing the deception that had played out under his command. Because that's how they would know I was still alive, Maricel explained. The submarine surfaces only if they confirm their contact is present and uncompromised. I had to be visible, yet unimportant enough that no one would question me too deeply. Hiding in plain sight, Wakefield murmured. The most effective form of camouflage, the Admiral confirmed. An unremarkable civilian that everyone sees but no one notices. And the submarine, another officer asked, how did it remain undetected for so long? That said, Admiral Holt, is where the true advances lie. The Phantom carries propulsion and stealth technology that was theoretical 30 years ago. They've had 3 decades to perfect it in isolation. 30 years underwater, been whispered. How did they survive? Marcel's expression softened. Sacrifice, Enan. Every crew member knew they might never see home again. They gave up families, futures, recognition, all to ensure that if America ever needed them, they would be there. Admiral Hull unfolded a large map and placed it on the conference table. The Phantom has detected what appear to be advanced underwater drones near our naval installations on the West Coast. Drones with capabilities that match nothing in our intelligence databases. Chinese, Russian, Wakefield asked. Unknown, Marcel said firmly. That's what makes the situation so concerning. The propulsion signatures don't match any known nation's technology, which is why the Phantom surfaced. Admiral Holt added, they've been tracking these unknown vessels for months, gathering intelligence. But when the drones began mapping our coastal defenses in detail, they determined it was time to alert the chain of command. What are we looking at exactly? Lieutenant Obasanjo asked, studying the map where several red markers indicated detection points. Meredith Excel touched a control, and a holographic display activated above the table, showing sonar readings and movement patterns. These vessels use a form of magneto-hydrodynamic propulsion that's virtually silent, she explained. No propellers, no conventional engine noise. They can reach depths our attack submarines can't safely navigate. And they appear to be mapping something specific. What are they looking for? Bryn asked. We believe they're searching for this. Admiral Holt said, indicating a marker off the coast. Station Delta. Wakefield straightened in his chair. Station Delta doesn't exist, sir. It was a proposed deep-sea research facility that was scrapped in the planning stages. That's what the public record shows. Marcel corrected. In reality, Station Delta was built in 1997 as a forward base for the Ghost Fleet. It's a subsurface installation housing advanced weapon systems, research facilities, and a maintenance dock for our submarines. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. So, these unknown drones are searching for a secret base that officially doesn't exist, Wakefield summarized. And the only people who can intercept them are crew members of submarines that are officially lost. Precisely, Admiral Hull confirmed, which is why Captain Arnaud's return is so critical. She's one of the few people alive who knows the full scope of Project Lazarus and can coordinate a response. What do you need from us, sir? Wakefield asked. Naval Station Evergreen will serve as our surface command center, the Admiral explained. I'm assigning Captain Arnaud as temporary base commander for this operation with you as her executive officer. Wakefield glanced at Meredith Excel, surprise evident in his expression. She met his gaze steadily, already shifting into her role as commander. We'll need to establish secure communications with the Ghost Fleet vessels, she said, and prepare for the arrival of the other submarines. Others, Bryn asked. The Phantom is just one of 3, Admiral Hull explained. The Barracuda and the Spectre will rendezvous here within the week. Together, they represent the most advanced naval force ever assembled, hidden from the world for over 3 decades. As the briefing continued, officers were assigned responsibilities. Security protocols were established, and the base began its transformation into the command center for an operation unlike any in naval history. When they finally adjourned, Marcel found herself alone with Commander Wakefield in the corridor outside. How are you adjusting, Commander? She asked. To discovering that my base is now the center of a covert operation involving submarines that don't officially exist, tracking underwater drones of unknown origin. He gave a wry smile. Just another day in the Navy, Captain. Meredith Excel's expression softened. I know this is difficult. Having your command structure suddenly changed, discovering that someone you've been dismissing for weeks is now your superior officer. Permission to speak freely, ma'am. Granted, I'm not concerned about the chain of command. What bothers me is that I failed to see what was right in front of me. A naval officer of your caliber stood on my dock for 23 days, and all I saw was an annoyance. That was the point, Commander. The best disguise is one that makes people want to look away. She paused. But for what it's worth, your suspicion was appropriate. In your position, I would have done the same. 1 week later, the submarine was docked at a secure berth, carefully examined by select personnel with special clearance. The base remained under heightened security as Project Lazarus was formally reactivated. Meredith Excel stood at the edge of the dock in her captain's uniform, speaking with the Phantom's commander, Captain Thorne, about their next deployment. The Barracuda reported in. Thorne said quietly, "They'll surface tomorrow at 0600. The Spectre is 3 days behind them. And the unknown vessels, still searching. We've managed to track 5 distinct units, but there could be more. They're using some kind of coordinated sweep pattern." Meritzel nodded, watching as technicians swarmed over the Phantom, studying its advanced systems with barely concealed awe. 30 years of innovation, she murmured. And now we finally get to use it. Ian and Bryn approached hesitantly, holding 2 coffee cups. "I thought you might want this, Captain. Real coffee, not the stuff from the mess." Meritzel smiled and accepted it. "Thank you, and then, if you don't mind me asking, ma'am, what was it like? 30 years underwater developing technology no one knows about." "It wasn't me underwater, and then. I was the one who carried the harder burden, living in the world, unable to tell anyone who I was or what I knew." She took a sip of the coffee, never being recognized for what I had sacrificed. "And now," Meritzel looked toward the horizon. "Now, the world needs to know we're still here, that America never stopped watching, never stopped preparing." Commander Wakefield joined them, a new respect evident in his bearing as he saluted her. "Base personnel have been fully briefed, Captain. Your quarters are prepared." "Thank you, Commander." She turned to face the base where sailors now stood at attention as she passed. The woman they had once mocked or ignored now revealed as one of the most decorated officers in a program that saved the nation in ways they were only beginning to understand. "Have you ever known someone who never asked for recognition?" Marksell said quietly, but deserved more than anyone else. "Yes, ma'am," Wakefield said, glancing at the submarine crew now emerging onto the dock. "I believe I'm looking at them." The next morning, as dawn broke over Naval Station Evergreen, Marksell stood in the operations center, watching as the USS Barracuda surfaced in the harbor. Unlike the Phantom, this submarine bore visible battle scars, evidence of encounters no one had documented, fights no one had witnessed. "Signal from the Barracuda captain," Bryn reported. "They're requesting permission to dock." "Permission granted," Marksell responded, and informed Captain Reeves that I expect a full briefing on their Arctic operations. As the Barracuda maneuvered toward the dock, Commander Wakefield studied the submarine through binoculars. "Those modifications to the hull," he said quietly. "They're like nothing I've ever seen." "Pressure adaptations," Marksell explained. "The Barracuda can dive deeper than any submarine in the official fleet. They've been operating beneath the Arctic ice cap for most of their deployment in areas our adversaries believe are inaccessible." What were they doing there? Mapping, listening, and occasionally neutralizing threats before they became public knowledge. Before Wakefield could ask more questions, Admiral Hull entered the operations center, accompanied by several officers in unmarked uniforms. "Captain Arnaud," the Admiral said formally, "the Joint Chiefs have reviewed the initial data from the Phantom. Project Lazarus has been given full operational authority in the unknown vessels. That's why I'm here. We've identified a signature in their communication patterns." He handed her a tablet. "They're not Chinese. They're not Russian. They're not anyone's." Marksell studied the data, her expression darkening. "Autonomous. Worse, they appear to be operated by an AI system with no human oversight. An AI that, according to our analysts, doesn't match any known development program." "What are you saying, Admiral?" "I'm saying that after 30 years of secrecy, Project Lazarus may be facing exactly the scenario it was designed for, an unknown adversary with capabilities beyond our conventional response options." Merritt Excel handed the tablet to Wakefield. Prepare the base for full combat readiness. The Ghost Fleet is going hunting. As Wakefield moved to carry out her orders, Admiral Holt drew closer to Meridexel. There's something else, he said quietly. Something only you need to know for now. He showed her another file on his secure tablet. Marksel's eyes widened as she read it. Are we certain? As certain as we can be. The Phantom's deep-sea sensors detected a signature that matches theoretical models for quantum communication. If that's what we're dealing with, then these aren't just advanced drones. Meritzel finished. They're scouts. Exactly. The question is, scouts for what? Meridexel looked out at the harbor where the Barracuda was now docking alongside the Phantom. Two submarines that officially didn't exist, crewed by men and women who had sacrificed everything for a mission they thought might never come. We've spent 30 years preparing for a moment like this, she said finally. It's time to show the world what the Ghost Fleet can do. As sailors scrambled to secure the Barracuda's moorings, Meridexel turned back to the Admiral. Contact Strackham. Tell them Project Lazarus is activating Phase 2. You're certain? Meritzel nodded, her expression resolute. I've spent 32 years waiting for this moment, Admiral. Standing on docks around the world, being ignored, dismissed, forgotten, always watching, always ready. She straightened her uniform and headed for the door. I'm not waiting anymore.